I'm Madeline Gent, and I'm Executive Director of the Associated Artists of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is known for its 90 neighborhoods, but those 90 neighborhoods are consolidated into 9 districts. And in each of those 9 districts is an incredible variety of life, art, culture, and people. In this series, we're going to examine each of those districts a little bit closer by looking at the work of one artist. In today's episode, we're going to look at the work of ceramicist Dale Huffman.
My name is Dale Huffman, and I'm a ceramist, mostly make functional pottery. I live in Mount Washington. It's close to everything. I can get to the airport in 20 minutes, I can get to the East End in 20 minutes, I teach at Carlow, I can get there in 12 or 13 minutes, so it's a great location. We lived in Chatham Village for 11, almost 12 years. It's a National Historic Landmark. It's architecturally significant. It's what we like about it is we came from a very noisy neighborhood, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I think I'm in the country. It's very quiet up there. Yeah, I left in 1968. I left my little hometown and came to Carnegie Mellon to be the next Einstein. I was studying physics at Carnegie Mellon, and I realized maybe by my junior year that as much as physics still interests me, it wasn't my life's work. And I found the art department and took a whole lot of art courses at Carnegie Mellon, and then went on for an MFA at Chicago Art. So my training was both undergraduate and graduate. And really what you learn, I'm trying to do better than that by my students, but back then, you learned the very, very basic foundation, and a lot of it I filled in on my own. I was a full-time studio artist for around 20 years. Actually, we started the studio in Illinois. After I finished grad school, I fixed air-cooled Volkswagens for a couple of years to pay off school loans and get the studio going. And then we moved back to Pittsburgh, and it was going to be temporary, and that was in 1977. We used to sell out of here more. Now that I've been teaching almost 20 years at Carlow, chairing the art department, so I have less time in the studio than I used to have. So most of the selling I do anymore, I do some with local galleries, yes, but I also increasingly send things out to national and international shows. Some of them are international competitions or national competitions, and I'll send images of work. Some of them, yes, I'm invited. It's a mix. Yes, I had a show at Box Art Gallery, which is here in Pittsburgh. Bill DiBernardi, the painter that I used to teach with, he retired. He and I had a show at Box Art. Oh yeah, and I had a show for the National Ceramic Conference was in Pittsburgh this last year. So I had work and shows there. Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realize, at Carlow, we get a lot of students who come in and they enjoy art, and so they think they're going to be an artist. And it needs to be a passion, it needs to be a calling. If you're going to be successful, you're going to work very hard, and unless you're lucky or have a trust fund, you're not going to make a lot of money. It's immensely rewarding, but those rewards aren't financial. And when we were full-time in the studio, we worked all the time. That's not a complaint. I felt so privileged to be able to go to the studio every day. But we worked really hard, and we didn't make a lot of money. And so what I'd advise students or anybody who wants to be an artist is, if it's not something that's a real passion that you're really driven to do, you might want to consider another career and make it an avocation. But if you have the passion for it, you'll make it work. First of all, when I went to Carnegie Mellon, I did really well in high school, but I worked my butt off to do really well in high school. And I got to Carnegie Mellon, which was number 5 or 6 in the country in physics at that point in the late 60s. And I was with a lot of people who coasted through high school and did just as well as I did. And I began to realize that it was maybe not my best move to stay in physics. That the people that were going to really make the breakthroughs were a lot brighter than I was. And the second thing is that I had an elective and I took a glassblowing course. And something that I can backfill now, but I didn't understand at the time, but all kind of light bulbs went off in my head when I started taking art courses. And what I've come to realize now, looking back, is that I thought I was a very rational, logical, linear person and did my best work in that mode, and actually I don't. I do my best work in a more intuitive mode. And I think it's just a matter of how you access information, but I think I access information differently. Let me give you an example. When people want to come to visit us, they'll ask for directions, and I'll hand the phone to Betsy. Because Betsy can tell them, you go down the street, you turn left on Jones Street, you turn right on Smith Street, and then there's a stop sign and you're there. The way I remember how to get to my house, and I'm making this up, but it's like this, is it's a little darker and it's a little lighter, something goes by, and then there's something blue over here. I can't give anybody those directions, but that's how I store that information. And so I've learned that although there are some problems that I need to solve linearly and rationally, and I'm good at that, but my best work I do when I let go of that and solve problems in a more intuitive mode. I'm a big picture kind of a person. So the Associated Artists is I think the oldest arts organization in Pittsburgh. I've been a member for, oh wow, probably 30 years. And actually as a ceramist, there are less opportunities than there would be for a painter, for instance. And I get it, I mean, you know, that makes sense. But I've certainly been in some shows they've curated for ceramists. So I'm involved with them, but I'm not as, for instance, I was years ago more involved with the Craftsman's Guild of Pittsburgh because that was directly related to my profession when I was full-time in the studio. But the Associated is a great organization. It's been around a long time. I started the year it became Carnegie Mellon. Betsy started a year before me when it was Carnegie Tech. Well, I was there with a lot of fairly well-known local artists though. People like Jim Nelson, people like, who else were we there with? Mark Parrott, the photographer. Who else? But there were a number of people, kind of local, pretty well-known artists that we were there with. Yeah, Diane Samuels. In our case, we went on a limb and formed a corporation with two other studios and bought this building in 1987. And so for us, it hasn't been an issue. In fact, if anything, our property value is going to go up. So when I eventually do retire, you know, that's a good thing. But I think gentrification is a real complex issue. You know, on the one hand, I heard the other day that the city for the first time has a surplus this year. You know, I think that the gentrification is helping the tax base. It helps a lot of things about the city, but it displaces a lot of people. So I don't see it as a one way or the other. I see it as a very complex issue. I see good and I see bad in it. I'm not sure I see it, but what happens with artists, traditionally if you don't own a place, is that the artists move in. In fact, in Penn Garfield there, you know, the local people were smart enough to give really cheap rates to artists to move in and rehab these places, and that's part of how that area is coming up. And then the artists are going to be eventually, you know, have to find another place to be. That tends to happen to artists traditionally, as we tend to get moved out. Mm-hmm. I wish it were savvy in business, but I think we did want some control over our surroundings. We'd all been in the old Duquesne Brewery on the south side, back when it was the Wild West. And we had no control over it. We just realized we wanted some control over our situation.